Hello, everybody. Welcome to How Leaders Lead, where every week you get to listen in while I interview some of the very best leaders in the world. I break down the key learnings so that by the end of the episode, you'll have something simple you can apply as you develop into a better leader. That's what this podcast is all about. Today's guest is Indra Nooyi, the former chairman and CEO of PepsiCo. Indra is an incredibly accomplished leader, and she ran PepsiCo for 12 years, from 2006 to 2018. And she navigated all kinds of challenges during that period. She went through a global recession, major restructuring, and sweeping changes in consumer habits. But you know what? During Indra's reign as CEO, PepsiCo's sales rose by 80%. Now, that kind of leadership is impressive. But what's even more impressive to me is how Indra does it, by looking for ways to elevate others and build them up. She intentionally carves out opportunities for the people she leads and serves. And this isn't just pie in the sky stuff, it's practical. You'll hear it when she goes into detail about PepsiCo's leadership development and retention strategies. You'll hear it when she talks about increasing diversity and calling out bias. You'll hear it when she shares her own story as a woman of color and immigrant from India. And you'll see for yourself that great leaders intentionally elevate the people they serve. And that's the big leadership lesson waiting for you in this week's episode. So here's my conversation with my good friend and soon to be yours, Indra Nooyi. Indra, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me. I really, really appreciate it.
David, I think the world of you, and you were a great leader of Yum Restaurants, and I've admired you for over the many, many years, and it's a pleasure to do this, a privilege to be invited onto your podcast.
Oh, great. Well, we are definitely living in some crazy times these days, and I always describe you as a change maker. Well, how do you think that coronavirus is changing the way that leaders will need to lead in the future?
I think COVID has challenged everybody because nobody has experienced a pandemic like this in our lifetimes. The last time it happened was in 1918. That was 102 years ago. So none of us really have a playbook to deal with the pandemic. So we're writing it as we go along. And as we're writing it, we are finding that so many things have to change as we go forward if we ever have another pandemic, which I hope we never do. Because pandemics require incredible coordination within a country, from the federal government to the state government, across countries, with multilateral institutions. And, all of those are not something we do regularly and test them. So this particular pandemic has challenged all of us to rethink all of our, institutions, our methods for cooperating across the country, across the world, because viruses know no borders. They're just borderless. And so it's a real challenge for all of us.
How much do you think the way how leaders will communicate will change? Right now we're living in this virtual world and everybody's saying digital's accelerating at least 3 to 5 years from where it was. But a lot of CEOs I talk to feel like they're closer to their employees today than they've ever been.
I actually think we missed the face-to-face interaction. I know I do. Having chaired the Reopen Connecticut Task Force, I missed the Reopen committee meeting in person and talking and arguing issues, because there's nothing like the emotion of a face-to-face meeting. And digital technologies are fantastic. Don't get me wrong, whether it's Zoom or Teams or any of the video conferencing apps, they're getting better every day. But what they don't bring is that heart to the whole process. When you have a face-to-face meeting, you can resolve issues faster than when you have a video conference. So I hope we have the opportunity to do both, face-to-face when it's needed, augmented with video conferencing like we have today, when we cannot really get to the office. So I think what this pandemic has enabled us to do is hybrid approaches to working in an office.
I know that you read the book, The Great Influenza, and it's about the Spanish flu that you just made reference to, which happened in 1918. What did you learn from reading that book that should be relevant to us today?
I'd say pretty much the whole book, David. And there are certain chapters, especially the last 3 pages of the book, which talks about what should leaders do in the next pandemic. Believe in the science, be brutally honest, pull no punches, tell the public exactly what's going on. Don't create a panic, but don't suppress the truth. Give them hope. Tell them exactly what you're doing. Trust the science. And so as I read the book, I almost felt like just taking out the 1918 influenza and substituting it with COVID. The similarities are eerie. And John Barrett did an excellent job writing that book. It was readable. It was difficult to understand the magnitude of the pandemic when it happened in 1918. It was worldwide. It was devastating. But I think we should all read it to make sure that we never have that happen to us again.
Well, I'm definitely going to give it a read myself. This is such a huge crisis. And, when you look back, Indra, what was the biggest crisis that you had to handle in your business career, and what'd you learn from it?
Multiple crises. If I go back to, just my PepsiCo days, and I was there for 25 years, when your CFO and president and IT is reporting to you and you have a major system failure, that's a crisis. Before a Memorial Day order processing, oh my God, you just freak out when you have the financial crisis and business is really taking a beating. It's a crisis you have to deal with. When an activist investor comes into your stock, it's a crisis you have to deal with. And each of these, I think for a brief moment you panic. That's inevitable. But then a good leader recovers from the panic really fast and says, okay, I'm done with the panicking, few minutes. Now let me see what I can do about it, because being in a state of panic doesn't help. People are looking up to you to see what you want them to do. You have to provide the direction. So you collect yourself and you sit up and you say, okay, let's put our arms around the issue. Let's really understand what's going on. Let's bring the experts in the room. Let's learn from them. And then start together, craft a plan forward. It's tough because deep down inside, you're feeling terrible about the fact that you have to handle this issue. But I tell you, after the first crisis you've had, the second one gets better, the third one gets even better. And it's a learning process. But I have to tell you, every crisis that you go through makes you a better person.
That's what that's saying, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Right?
That's exactly right.
Leaders have also had to witness and respond to the tragic death of George Floyd and the rightful plea for racial justice. You have such a renowned platform, Indra. What are you doing on this front, and what advice do you have to offer to other leaders?
A lot of what I did was when I was at PepsiCo. PepsiCo was a company that really believed in diversity and inclusion. And, going back to the days of Steve Reinemund, when he really jump-started the whole D&I process, I had the opportunity to have a critical mass of people of all kinds in PepsiCo so that we could build on that critical mass of people. So I first want to give credit to Steve Reinemund for what he put into the company. And PepsiCo wanted to be a company where its employee base reflected the consumer base. So we were inching our way up to those numbers in the company. And we were making very good progress, not just in hiring, but in retaining and developing. So we were having explicit programs to make sure we retain people and we develop people, because we didn't want to lose people. We struggled so much to hire. So we worked very hard at that. Now that I've retired, I don't have a platform as such. But I will tell you, David, I'm very, very enthused by what I'm seeing in any forums that I'm attending, because many, many CEOs are committing to really work this issue in a very focused, immediate way, which I think is a big change from the past, where people were just looking at, this issue and saying, I'll get to it or I'll address it over the years. Now they're saying we have to put the money behind these programs. We have to do it now. So I'm actually very optimistic that this time around, people will recognize that it's not a nice to do, it's a must do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Indra, I know that you are a big fan of the great late Representative John Lewis. What do you think we can learn from him? I mean, he was a great civil rights leader, great congressman. What can we learn from him and how he tried to solve the problem?
I think if you go back to John Lewis, and I've been doing a lot of reading of Martin Luther King and other leaders, I think basically the message that they were giving is one of unity, solving problems through unity, not through divisions. If you read everything John Lewis said, It was through unity. Do not divide a society. Let's come together and solve issues. And to me, that's what endeared me to John Lewis, if you want to call it that. And at no point in his career, in spite of all that he went through, did he ever talk about a divided society. He only talked about us coming together to resolve these issues. And he was a man of hope. He always thought we could address these issues. And he never held a grudge. If you go back and look at all of the stuff he went through, he never held a grudge. I wish I could be such a big person that he was.
Yeah. You've always believed in confronting bias publicly, and you've written about it, and you say that confronting bias publicly is essential. Can you tell us a story of when you've done that?
Typically, what happens is there's unconscious bias more than conscious bias. Sometimes when a woman is talking, somebody will roll their eyes, or when somebody who's diverse of any kind talks or says something, some group in the meeting would roll their eyes or cut them off. You can't allow that to happen. They may not even realize they're doing it, but you've got to stop that and say, hey, why did you stop? Why did you talk over that person? Why did you cut that person off? Why did you roll your eyes when that person was talking? What was the issue you were addressing when you rolled your eyes? So at every point when you see bad behavior, conscious or unconscious, you've got to call it out right there. If it happens again and again, it's conscious. If it happens once and they change, it was unconscious the first time. So you give them a pass the first time. The second time you get serious, and the third time you really go for some action. So I think it's a question of education. It's a question of giving them a chance, modeling their behavior back to them and seeing how they feel about it. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight.
I understand, Indra, that you have a new book in the works, and you have so many valuable experiences. What do you plan to cover in your book?
It's all about integrating work and family. And basically, the premise of my book, David, is that as a country, we want to enable families to have about 2 kids per family. That's the replacement rate for the country. But we also want every brain in the country to be deployed in the work of the country so that we can grow as a country. And that I'm talking about men and women alike. So the real question is, how do we enable all of them to be able to come to work and have a paid job so that the GDP of the country can grow? At the same time, families are also created and children are nurtured and developed. So how do we provide the support system for people in terms of childcare, in terms of family leave, maternity care, whatever, in order to enable them to have families and work without going through incredible stress? I find that men and women alike today, young people, are going through a lot of stress when they have to balance so many priorities. So the real question is, how do you create institutional policies working between governments, societies, communities, companies to be able to make it happen?
Yeah, that's a book I'm going to read, Indra. So I'm hoping you'll give me an autographed copy.
I'm hoping that I'll come back on your podcast and talk about it, David.
I can't wait to do that. That'll be great. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, but you've taken on a special project to help Governor Ned Lamont in Connecticut. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Yeah, 2 things. One, I'm the co-chair of the Advanced CT, which is Advancing Connecticut's Economic Opportunities. It's a business-led entity in the state of Connecticut. We're not a government organization. We are a private organization. And we really talk about how to bring investment to Connecticut. That's what I was doing until Governor Lamont wanted me to co-chair the Reopen Connecticut Task Force and to help him with how to think about how he should reopen Connecticut. So it was a private task force through Advanced CT. And we helped provide the governor a framework so that he and his cabinet could decide exactly how they wanted to reopen Connecticut. And we worked for about 10 weeks, all of us, with the government officials, with all kinds of experts. And we provided a framework to the governor, who then took the framework with his team, modified it, and applied it in the state of Connecticut successfully. First of all, he's a wonderful governor, so everything worked out very well.
That's great. That's great. Once a change maker, always a change maker.
Trying, David, just like you,
you know,
all of
you
us.
you sit on the review panel for Quality Can't Wait Challenge that Melinda Gates champions. What do you hope to accomplish by doing that?
I think we're just trying to find role models and showcase them and give them prizes so that people feel like there's something they can aspire to. When you look at any of these organizations that set up prizes and give it to people, it's because they want to recognize people for doing things that move society forward. You never give a prize to somebody to move society back. You always give a prize to move society forward. So, there's Equality Can't Wait, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg Award committee that I sit on, all of Jason Witten Collegiate Award Committee I sit on, all of these are to move society forward. Somebody who's done something wonderful beyond the call of what they're regularly doing to help move societal issues, to help address societal issues and move society forward. And to me, Equality Can't Wait. The submissions haven't come to me, but when I did Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Jason Witten Collegiate Award, some of the write-ups of the people that came to us, just spectacular. People are doing some amazing things. It'll make your heart very warm.
You've met so many amazing leaders. Who would be the most impressive female leader that you've met?
Impressive female leader. Let me name a few because I think I've met, a bunch of people. Christine Lagarde just blows me away. She's brilliant. She's global. She's focused. She understands issues around the world in spectacular ways. I enjoy talking to Christine Lagarde. Mm-hmm. Hillary Clinton is perhaps one of the smartest women I've ever met, smartest people I've ever met. Kay Bailey Hutchinson from Texas is somebody I simply adore. I've had many, many conversations with Kay Bailey Hutchinson. I even did a luncheon for her in Dallas. She's a calming person with a great global view. I've enjoyed talking to her. If I go over to Asia, Ho Ching of Singapore is another person who has a very global perspective of all issues. And when you sit down and talk to Ho Ching, you leave feeling even more informed about the state of the world. So my job, and even today, I come in contact with all these people. And I've truly enjoyed getting to know them and chatting with them and learning from them more than anything else.
I'm sure that's a two-way street. There's no doubt about that.
I hope so, but I think I'm the net beneficiary.
I have to ask you, just how hard has it been for you to step back from being on the front line of such a major company like PepsiCo and being the CEO and having that responsibility? How hard has it been?
So let me talk about what I thought it would be and what it is. I thought I was going to be bereft because 25 years, go in PepsiCo, and 15 years before that, the last 12 as CEO, and I'm saying, oh my God, what am I going to do with my life? I walked out of the PepsiCo headquarters on October 2nd as I stepped down as CEO. And I walked into my office in Greenwich, my family office, and I haven't looked back. I've been busier than before in my own way. My life is richer in a funny way because I'm learning so much more, meeting more interesting people, and I'm not wedded to a quarterly earnings cycle, which sort of grinds at you. And remember, I was CFO and president and then CEO. I did 75 quarters of earnings releases, 75 quarters. That's a lot. And in a funny way, I tell you, I feel lighter, healthier. I loved PepsiCo and its people when I was there. But I'm a new person now. I'm reborn.
Yeah, well, you're reborn and you're doing a lot of great things, which is no surprise to me. I always tell everybody when people ask me that question, I didn't know I could love something so much and miss it so little.
You and I are exactly the same, David. I think we've got such productive lives that we have no time to miss anything else.
You are such an avid learner. How are you continuing to sharpen your axe?
First of all, I'm involved in so many activities, so many businesses. I advise so many little startup companies, but I don't just advise them, I actually learn their business. I go to school on their business, and I really want to understand what that industry is. And so that allows me to open my vistas a lot. Being on the Amazon board, I learned so much from them. It's perhaps one of the most, I think it's a 23rd century company. It's like the technologies that they embrace, the way they think about the future, the way they think about the customer, because they're always customer first, is unbelievable. So I think that has been an amazing learning opportunity. I teach up at West Point, the military academy, and watching those cadets learn, watching those faculty members teach them, I sit there and look at them in awe because the discipline, the focus, the commitment, the patriotism they have is something that I think, David, I'm trying to get you out there to West Point to speak to them. It is just amazing. So I am involved in so many things, and each of the activities I'm involved in is actually teaching me more than I'm teaching them.
I'd be honored to be a guest at
just the Zoom, but you know what? They would benefit enormously from you.
I would love to do that. Indra, you were recognized on the 100th birthday of the League of Women Voters as the most outstanding woman in business. What did that mean to you?
Good news, bad news. Let me tell you what it is. The great news is that they looked at me and said that I was a role model. I paved the way for other women to say, hey, we too can be like Indra, somebody of color, somebody who's an immigrant. I gave hope to so many people. So that part made me feel great. The part that made me feel a little bad, that there weren't as many of us as there could have been. If you really look at it, our numbers are still small. I think in 10 or 15 years, it's going to be much more. But the fact that the progress over the last 50 to 75 years has been glacial made me feel bad. While you like to be celebrated, you want to be among a much larger group. I mean, we were 10% of the Fortune 500 and women CEOs. So we have a long way to go. And so, like I said, it's good news, bad news. You feel great being celebrated, but you know that you've got to pave the way for more people to come up in the ranks. That's why the book is important.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing that I know that you do is you challenge everyone to get a female mentor.
Yeah.
Explain that.
It's interesting. When I left PepsiCo, people kept saying, why didn't you replace yourself with a woman CEO? Why don't they ask the men that? Why haven't you replaced yourself with a woman CEO? So I think it's a question of all of us have to pull each other up. Women should not be mentoring just women. Men should not be mentoring just men. It should be all over the place. Men should mentor women. Women should be mentoring men because we all learn from each other. So I always tell people, if you go and get a female mentor, you'll just get a feel for the other side, the EQ more than just the IQ. You'll understand business from the point of view of somebody quite different. Make sure you understand everybody's point of view. And that's why I think that it always helps to have male mentors, but it also helps to have female mentors because they give you just a slightly different perspective.
Yeah. Indra, I didn't know you were on the Amazon board. I should have known that, but it's interesting. Jeff Bezos is an amazing leader. What have you learned watching him in action?
I don't think I've met anybody quite as brilliant as him. It's just his brain, the way it works, how much he's willing to absorb or can absorb, how he can push the boundaries of thinking and innovation and invention. I am more in awe than anything else. The fact that he's built this US-based enterprise from the ground up, from the trunk of his car, is just a, how do I call it? The eighth wonder of the world. Look at the size of that company. He built it from the trunk of his car. Okay? Yeah. And it's not a company, even though it's founder-led, he doesn't act that way. He runs it very professionally. So the fact that somebody like him, who grew up in very humble circumstances, can build this incredible enterprise and it's still in its early stages is something that we can all learn from. And every time I go to an Amazon board meeting or read anything they send or interface with them, I just sit there going, man, these are unusual human beings.
I think every business person in the world would like to be a fly on the wall of one of those meetings just to learn.
Yeah, so I consider myself, lucky to be able to learn from the masters there.
This is always fun catching up with you, Indra, and I want to have a little more fun. And I'm going to do a lightning round of Q&A with you, okay? Mm-hmm. What 3 words best describe you?
Caring, passionate, but driven.
If you could be one person in the world for a day, who would it be and why?
I would have liked to have been Nelson Mandela in Robben's Island for one day, just to experience what he went through. I went to Robben's Island about 3 years ago and to the Apartheid Museum. And I've never come out crying from a trip as I did that particular trip.
That was a very inspiring trip for me too. I'll never, ever forget the fact that he could live in that room and come out and be so humble and bring everybody together. An incredible leader. Mm-hmm. What's something about you, Indra, that few people would know?
That I care more about mentoring and developing other people than anything else. To me, that is the single most important thing. And I just calculated in the last 6 years in PepsiCo, I gave the world, I think, 9 CEOs, about 3 CFOs and 3 CHROs and 3 CMOs. So interestingly, I look at that as perhaps one of the biggest accomplishments because we developed those leaders. I feel great about that.
That's a big family tree you can be proud of there.
Yeah. But you're that way too. You taught me a lot of that too, David.
Do you have any hidden talents?
Hidden talents. I love to ballroom dance.
I bet you're great at that. And do you have a favorite quote off the top of your head?
The Martin Luther King speech, "What's Your Life's Blueprint?" 6 paragraphs. It was delivered in 1963, I think, or 67 in Barat High School in Philadelphia. It's 6 paragraphs. It talks about what's your life's blueprint. And every word of that one-page speech is a quote I live by. I read that speech almost every week. It's about how to live life and do the best you can and be as perfect as you can be, as defined as by you, but be as perfect as you can be. Yeah. And I read that speech again and again, and I say, that is my life's blueprint.
We'll be back with the rest of my conversation with Indra Nooyi in just a moment. If you want to elevate the people on your team, you have to actually care about them. That may sound so elementary, but it's so true. In my conversation with John Calipari, head basketball coach at the University of Kentucky, you'll hear how he puts the idea into action.
Larry Brown told me if you care about people, you'll always have a job. And if they know you care, you can be aggressive, you can coach them, as long as they know you care.
If you want to elevate your team and help them be at their best, go listen to my conversation with Coach Cal, episode 22, here on How Leaders Lead. Could you just tell us about your upbringing? Where'd you grow up? And, did you have any real pivot moments in your early days?
Thank you for that question. I was born and brought up in India, in the south of India, in a city that was called Madras, now called Chennai. And I was born and brought up in a very conservative South Indian family, a very middle-class family. We were rich in intellect. We were rich in family connections, being together. We didn't have much money. But it didn't matter because we didn't know what having money was. We were very happy with what we had. We focused on education. We focused on respecting each other, working hard. And my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, was a very strong figure in our family, always believed that it didn't matter if you were a girl or a boy. Just study hard, work hard, and always deliver on what you committed to deliver upon. And if you did that, your life is going to be set forever. And don't be too ambitious. Don't be too political. Don't always be thinking about the next thing you want to do. Just do what you're given. Do it well. And do it better than anybody else can do it. And if you did that, the whole world will sit up and take notice. And that's the spirit that he inculcated in us. And we didn't even know what having money was. We were happy with the little we had. But the family was together, the extended family was together, and we just built off of each other and just worked hard. That's all I know.
Yeah, well, you have that love and support at family. That's a tremendous blessing. You really don't, even though your upbringing may not be that privileged, you've got that support to take you with you. That's fantastic.
We had a different kind of privilege. We had the privilege of togetherness.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great phrase. And I know you were huge into education, and you actually got a bachelor's in physics, chemistry, and mathematics. I mean, what else could you have done, Indra, with your time there? That's great. What made you want to go get an MBA?
Well, I graduated from college when I was 18 years old, and graduated from high school when I was 15. I did 3 years of college because I skipped a year of college. And in India, you go on to graduate school immediately after you graduate from college. So at age 18, I went to graduate school in India and graduated the year 20 and started to work. And, you always want to be an overachiever because everybody around you is an overachiever. And everybody's trying to do their absolute best and move ahead. So for the sake of your family, for the sake of bringing pride to your parents, which is really what we were all motivated by. It's interesting. We weren't doing all this for ourselves. We wanted everybody to say that the parents have brought you up so well. We did it because we wanted our parents to feel proud and our family to be viewed as awesome. And so we all worked very hard, tried to get through school and college quickly and started to work. And, my first job was with a textile company, had a great time, learned a lot. Then I was a product manager at Johnson & Johnson for personal products at a time when India didn't allow advertising of personal products, and so it was always sold from under the counter. So I learned a lot about how to sell a product that couldn't be marketed, that couldn't be talked about, but was necessary. And in both jobs that I was in, I was stretched beyond my wildest imagination. I had mentors who always told me, you can do it. Even when I said, oh my God, I have no idea how to do this, they said, you can do it, go figure it out. And so I went out and figured it out. I worked my tail off. I never left the office until I figured it out because I never wanted to let the company down. I didn't want to let my family down. I didn't want to let myself down. And so I accelerated through these two companies. And then I realized that I really had not been old enough to get a master's degree when I did. And that's when I applied to the Yale School of Management and came to the United States to get what I call a real master's degree.
That had to be just such a dramatic change to go from India to the United States. And, what was it like to come into a new culture like that? And how did you get acclimated?
The first thing I tell you, I was shocked, surprised, amazed, worried, because I didn't think my parents would give me permission to come to the United States alone. With the family background that we had, it was very protective. So when they agreed to, allow me to come to Yale to study, I was like, are you sure? Yale's not next door. It's in New Haven, Connecticut. I'm going to be 8,000 miles away from you. They said, look, we trust you. Go ahead and, strike out on your own. So I want to first say how grateful I am to my parents for buying me that air ticket, putting me on that plane. Even though I had a scholarship and loan, the fact that they allowed me to go was a big deal. When I came to the United States, first of all, I was lonely like hell because I'd never traveled outside the country. And, it took a while getting used to everything. I was a vegetarian. I didn't know how to get vegetarian food in New Haven at that time. And Yale at that time in 1978 didn't have a mechanism to integrate international students easily. Now it's fantastic, but then it wasn't that systematized. So the first couple of weeks were dreadful. I wanted to hop on the plane and go back. I didn't know what to do. But you know what? Little by little, the other students at Yale reached out. A host family reached out. Other international students got together and built ourselves a little ecosystem. And before the month was done, I was as American as the others. And this is the amazing thing about the United States, how we reach out and embrace people who are completely different than us. And I tell you, that was just a wonderful, wonderful time. And I never looked back from those days.
You talked about how your parents gave the opportunity to come to the United States and you could possibly strike out. That's a baseball metaphor. And I happen to know you are an incredible baseball fan. Now, how did that happen?
Well, you see, I used to play cricket when I was in India. It was a bat and ball sport. And when I landed in the United States, I had to be involved or learn or watch a bat and ball sport. And this was 1978, the big year that, remember the Yankees being 14 games behind the Red Sox and then catching up in the big Bucky Dent game. Then they went on to win the World Series. So I sat there in the dorm room, in the common room, and the other kids explained baseball to me. And I fell in love with the New York Yankees. I didn't fall in love with baseball as a whole. I fell in love with the Yankees. And that love affair with the Yankees has not died, even today. And since then, I've been a diehard Yankees fan through thick and thin. And I follow them all the time, and they're in my blood. And I love, love, love watching them play.
Now, after you got your MBA at Yale, you started out in the consulting world at Boston Consulting Group. What were your key learnings from going into an environment like that, where obviously a lot of high-powered IQ points in that company?
Getting into consulting was considered sort of a feather in people's cap because it was so hard to get into a Boston Consulting Group or a McKinsey or a Booz Allen in those days. And everybody interviewed and very few got in. And so I was scared to even interview because I had no idea whether I'd get in. But, you go through these 7, 8, 10 interviews. Each one is a case study. And I got through the system and I joined Boston Consulting Group. And I must tell you, in my 6.5 years at BCG, I probably learned the equivalent of 15 years in a regular corporate job because I learned multiple industries, multiple issues, dealt with multiple levels of the client, dealt with strategy issues at the 25,000-foot level and operating issues at the ground level, dealt with friendly clients and hostile clients. So it was sort of indoctrination by fire, David, and working with a group of consultants who are so smart and so brilliant sort of raised your game. And the time that I was at BCG was invaluable. And I think I learned so much in such a short period that I wouldn't trade that experience for anything in the world.
From that, what did you really glean in terms of what a consultant should really provide a client?
First thing, a consultant, is not brought in because of their knowledge of the industry. They're not brought in just because they're objective. Because you can ask any man on the road or woman on the road and they'll give you an objective perspective. Consultants are brought in to provide frameworks, provide you a way of thinking, provide the company, a framework that challenges status quo in the company or reaffirms the way things are being done in the company. Too often we think the consultant's the expert is going to give us the answer. What I learned in my consulting time is how do you develop frameworks to help companies, go through a thought process. And that framework was developed based on a rich understanding of the firm itself, based on all the work they'd done, but my own understanding based on the work that I had done. And as I watched my time through BCG, my frameworks got more rigorous, more well thought through, more client sensitive.
That's great. When you came to PepsiCo, you hit the ground running and you quickly became the CFO. And, I don't think many people really recognize this, but you were really the architect of spinning off Pizza Hut and Taco Bell and KFC, which I had the privilege of running. And, PepsiCo at the time had those 3 divisions plus Frito-Lay and Pepsi. That was a huge decision. And you convinced Roger Enrico, who was the CEO at that time, how to do it. And you had to convince a lot of other people that this made sense. How did you go through that process?
Again, it comes back to this notion of don't just start with the predetermined conclusion that the restaurants had to be spun off. We knew that the restaurant operating system was very different. And as you remember, David, you and I worked very closely together. The restaurant operating system was different. And in many ways, what we were doing was we were trying to move it to a packaged goods culture, even though it was a service business. And it was 2 operating systems that coexisted in this PepsiCo system. So the first thing we had to do was, rather than just say we ought to spin out the restaurants, understand the restaurant business. Understand, what's the future of the restaurant business? What's needed to be successful in the restaurant business? Why can't PepsiCo be successful in the business? And we had to do that deep analysis so that we could convince people on facts, not on emotion. Because analysts at that time were saying, just spin it off. But you know what? You don't give away one of your children because the restaurants business was, grown in PepsiCo. And everybody in restaurants were PepsiCo people that we all loved, had great relationships with. So, in order to come up with any decision regarding restaurants, whether to keep it, improve its performance, operate it differently, or spin it out, we had to understand the business cold. So for 6 months, in a very small circle, we embarked on a very deep strategic analysis of the QSR industry. What was going on? What are the trends? You know, how is this whole new build versus franchise versus operating by the company? How is that model changing? How are the economics of restaurant management changing? What kind of people should be in restaurants? And again, using the consulting analogy, visited restaurants, spoke to owners, spoke to franchisees, watched franchisees at work as opposed to company people at work. You know, understood the business ground up, understood the economics, understood its future cold. And it led us to the conclusion that not to spin out the restaurant, that's not the word I would use. I'd say we decided to unfetter the restaurant business from the rest of PepsiCo. Very important, because it was a wonderful business, but it was in fact prisoner to the packaged goods culture. And when we unfettered the restaurant from the packaged goods culture and allowed you to be who you were and put the right leadership, i.e., you, all of a sudden, the company thrived because you enhanced that service culture, you enhanced the operating model, and it was one of the best performing stocks and enhanced the shareholder value of existing PepsiCo shareholders and all the new Yum shareholders that came in. So I think it was a big win-win.
Absolutely. And I thank you very much for it. I had the time of my life building that company. It's great. What anxieties did you have personally as a leader stepping into a role like that?
You see, the period from 2001 to 2006 was the glory days of the CPG world. Walmart was growing in leaps and bounds. The developed world was doing very well. Emerging markets were only then emerging. China, India were just emerging. But it was a glorious time where, everything was coming up roses. Yet, as I looked at the economy, as I looked at the trends, I realized that we were in for rocky times. I saw Walmart slowing down in growth. I saw a looming financial crisis because of the excessive leverage in the system. And I saw tremendous growth in the emerging markets where we were underrepresented. So I'm sitting here going, how are we going to navigate as a company through all these changes? And while we had to deal with all these external changes, internally in the company, our bottling system was behaving, in interesting ways. We had to address that. And we had to figure out how to do all this without having the investors say, hey, why aren't you delivering the kind of returns that we expect from PepsiCo? So there was a lot of anxiety when I took over. And I realized that I could have all the anxieties inside. But to the company, I had to project confidence, optimism, a can-do spirit, and a must-do resolve. So it was tough times, I must say.
Yeah. When you have this macro environment, that's right out there, and you're the CEO and you want to project this, did you have any tricks that you would use to get yourself all ready to go to project what you had to project as a leader, even though you had some of these concerns?
Well, the one thing I've learned is don't lie to the people. Don't tell your people one thing when the reality is something different. So I confronted the truth with my people and said, hey, this is the nature of the environment in front of us. Let's all make sure we all understand it together because we're going to have to navigate it together. But it's not enough to tell them what the environment is going to look like. I also had to tell them exactly what we were going to do. What we were going to do in the short term, medium term, and long term. I told them in the short term what they needed to do just to keep the performance going. In the medium term, what kind of acquisitions we were going to make to bolster the company's portfolio in emerging and developing markets. And for the long term, what were we going to do today to invest in R&D, to start the portfolio transformation, to put in place multiple initiatives which will not pay out today, but require investment today to pay out in the long term. Now, I was scared, David, because I didn't know whether people would subscribe to this. What surprised me the most was they did. They were in fact relieved that that's what we were going to do because we were all seeing the trends. And they were just
Right.
happy.
They knew you didn't have your head in the sand and that you got it, and then that gave them confidence that you could go into the future together. You know, Indra, one of the things that you really espouse is the importance of corporations making a difference in the world, and that, you know, we can really do that. You know, and you really have embarked on for a number of years this whole idea of performance with purpose. What do you mean by that, and how did you get to that?
Performance with purpose has been the driving principle of this company. And I tell you, it's a profound set of words, because initially people will say, oh, this is about corporate social responsibility. It's not, because CSR by itself is how do you spend the money you make? You know, where do you give to some charitable causes? To me, performance with purpose was how do you drive performance with a deliberate sense of purpose which enhances the delivery of performance. So it was a virtuous circle. And purpose, in my mind, had three elements to it. The first was human sustainability. How do you transform this product portfolio? So going into the future, it was future-proofed and kept growing. The second part was environmental sustainability. How do you make sure that you reduce your carbon footprint, reduce water usage? Because if you did that, you lower costs and societies give you a license to operate. Because if you use a lot of water and your plant is in a water distressed area, people will throw you out. And the third part was talent sustainability. How do you make sure you have an environment where you bring the best and brightest into PepsiCo? And simply put, you cannot deliver performance unless you transform the product portfolio, because the consumer was changing. If you don't get a license to operate from society, which is part of environmental sustainability, you can't deliver performance. And if you don't have great people, you can't deliver performance. So to me, profits, product, planet, and people is what the ecosystem is all about. And why did I do it? I honestly believe companies are like little republics. You know, given our market cap, we are the 37th largest country in the world. And we are a company which has global governance. And, you know, countries don't have global governance, they have country governance. So we can actually lift and shift best practices. We can leverage our powerful distribution systems, do so much to help countries around the world to address their issues, which in turn creates more consumers for our products. So I honestly believe that if we wanted to be the good company, good commercially, good ethically, we had to embrace performance with purpose in order to do our duty as a responsible multinational in every country in which we operated. And I felt that that was the only way corporations should behave. And that's why Performance with Purpose was born in 2006. It has sustained even today. And if you ask anybody in PepsiCo, they'll tell you that's why they're still at PepsiCo.
Oh, that's great. And, you know, I think that people don't want to go to work every day to be a part of something mediocre. They want to go to work every day to be a part of something they're proud of and really work on greatness. And I think that's a very aspirational vision for your company. Now, I know along the way you developed a framework, one of the frameworks that you learned maybe from your consulting days, or the importance of the framework, where you decided to categorize PepsiCo products as fun for you, better for you, and good for you. And you know, this put each of the products into one of those buckets. Now, what was your thinking behind that?
You know, our product portfolio is so broad and so diverse. And, you know, I felt that PepsiCo sometimes is viewed as a soda and chips company, when in reality, we had a wide variety of products. The good for you products were products with positive nutrition, products with grains, fruit and vegetable, protein, sports nutrition. That's what we call good for you. Fun for you, on the other hand, was your sodas, full sugar sodas, your Lay's, Doritos, all of that was your fun for you products. When you had a diet product, which was a soda with 0 calorie, that was a better for you product. And so our goal was invest in all three, but dial up the better for you and good for you. Now, where our thinking has evolved, David, in the better for you category. Earlier, better for you was versus the fun for you. So if it was a 0 calorie product, it was better for you. If it had reduced sugar, it was better for you. But it was always relative to the fun for you. Recently, though, we've said, let's make the definition more science-based and use externally developed criteria. So if externally they say products which have so much saturated fat is considered all right, products with this level of sodium is okay, products with this level of sugar is okay to consume, then we use those criteria to define what we call our guilt-free portfolio, which include products with positive nutrition like Quaker Oats and Tropicana juice, and products that scientific authorities like the WHO, the Institute of Medicine, have deemed adequate levels or acceptable levels of sugar, fat, and salt. And so we've now defined the portfolio in a broader way, and we are working the whole portfolio to move more and more from fun for you to guilt-free products. And the idea is enjoy our products.
Absolutely. You make great tasting food in all different venues, which is fantastic. And, I know, though, one of the challenges you had when you went for this transformation is you've got Pepsi and Lay's potato chips and Doritos, which are the fun for you products. And as you're trying to transform the company and move into the better for you or the area where the consumer's going, you had a lot of people saying, hey, don't you believe in our core products? And how did you handle that?
Oh boy, that was tough times, David, because, I'm a full sugar Pepsi drinker and I eat a bag of Lay's every day. So I actually love those products. And people who complain to me that I should not transform the portfolio, invest in what we have today, I did something very simple. I said to them, look, guys, let's look at the products that deplete when we have our meetings. When we were in the 1990s, everybody was drinking full sugar Pepsi and Dew and Sierra Mist and things like that. As you go to the 2000, 2006, if I looked at the depletion rate, it was more Diet Pepsi, Pepsi Max. And as you go to 2006, 2007, the trend shifted again. We were consuming more Aquafina. And I said to them, hang on a second. If we are changing our own eating and drinking habits, why do you think consumers out there are not changing their eating and drinking habits? We're becoming a repertoire. I'm not suggesting you should swing the pendulum widely. All that I'm saying is we ought to invest broadly in fun for you, better for you, and good for you. And if we don't offer a balanced portfolio of great tasting products to our consumers, we're going to lose this competitive battle. Initially, there was resistance. I think emotionally they bought it, but intellectually they were not willing to accept it.
Right. Right. And how did you personally handle that criticism that you were getting in some corners of the world?
I had many corners, many corners, retired executives, long-serving executives, some investors. I think what really withstood the test of time was two things. One, I had tremendous resolve on our strategy. I was convinced this was the only strategy this company should be following. And the only way we could have changed our direction is if the board had fired me. Second, we had an unbelievably good board. The board bought into the strategy and said, this is the only way you should lead the company. And when you had the board in your corner and, a vocal, involved, detail-oriented board in your corner who were not going to be swung by any disgruntled ex-employee, you know that you're on the right track. So the combination of the unbelievable board support and my own personal resolve is what allowed me to keep the strategy going. And then, our employees started to buy in and, one success beget other successes. And that's why we are where we are today.
Absolutely. That's great. And, speaking of your employees, what do you do to really motivate the troops? I mean, what do you think is the key to motivation?
Now, PepsiCo is a great place to work. So first of all, people love coming to work at PepsiCo. But David, we've learned a lot from you too. This culture of recognition is very important. People like to be recognized for small things and big things. And we've put in place many recognition programs in PepsiCo. On a day-to-day basis, any manager can recognize somebody at PepsiCo by giving them a coupon or a little gift or a little a ticket to something. So you can do anything on a local basis. But on an institutionalized basis, we actually do a lot of recognition. Every year we do the Ring of Honor, which is the frontline salesmen of PepsiCo, salesmen and saleswomen. About 300 of them come to purchase from around the world. And for 3 days, we treat them fantastically and say thank you to them for this unbelievable job they're doing in the front lines of PepsiCo. Because they do a good job and we get all the credit. So these are unbelievable people who make PepsiCo look good every day on the shelves. So that's a big program. 8 years ago, I put in something called Circle of Champions, which is for all the people on the factory floors. Because we were lauding the salespeople, we forgot the people in the factory floors. So the Circle of Champions is all the people in the factory floors, same number that come in October. And we have this unbelievable celebration of their successes. We do the Harvey Russell diversity and inclusion. Are we really promoting diversity? Are we embracing diversity? Are we complimenting people on their diversity initiatives? We do that. The Steve Reinemund D&I Award. We give out R&D awards. So every function has an award ceremony which gives awards to people who do a great job. And then people like Al Carey give out this crushed Coke can for somebody who does something to take on competition.
I like that one.
Yeah, but you do all those things too. We learn from you.
Yeah.
And so I think across this company, this culture of recognition is simply ingrained. And from my perspective, one of the things where I've gotten the most satisfaction, it's not an award, it's not giving them a little certificate or whatever. When I write letters to parents of some of my executives, and I tell the parents what a great job their son or daughter is doing, that recognition is worth more than money, stock grants, hugs, tickets, anything. Because at the end of the day, and I go back to where I started, when your parents say to you, I am so proud of you, and your boss just wrote to me saying that you are awesome, and the look on their face, is worth $1 million. And that's what I do very regularly in PepsiCo, because to me, that gives me more satisfaction than anything else.
You clearly understand the power of recognition and the privilege of being able to give it, and the privilege of being the CEO and what that would mean to a mom and dad to receive a letter from you. That's outstanding. PepsiCo's known for its leadership development. And, what do you think makes a great leader? I mean, what do you really look for in leadership?
There's all these soft skills, hard skills. People, look at all of these tests that people can take to assess for leadership qualities. But when I interview somebody, I look for 2 or 3 things. First, as I talk to the person and I have the conversation with them, are they curious? Do they really want to be a lifelong student? Do they ask the right questions to get to the next level of insight? That's something I look for very carefully, because I hate people who walk in and want to maintain status quo. I love people who are lifelong learners who are always pushing the boundaries. That's one thing I look for. Second, I look for people who believe in high quality work. Do people really sweat the details? Do they really want to look at the product that they turn out and say, this is the absolute best I could have done, as opposed to, let's just get something out to her. She'll fix it anyway. I hate that kind of performance. And the third and the most important, I should have started with it, but I'm going to end with it, is I look for people who throw their head, heart, and hands into the job. Sometimes people just come to work saying, hey, it's a job. It's not a job. It's a calling. It's a passion. It's something that consumes your life. And you've got to come in with a sense of optimism. You've got to come in with a sense of, I can do it. A sense of, I can do it. It must be done. I'm going to get everybody with me to get it done. There's got to be this constant love for the company that you project constantly. And, when we do the interview process, not so many people bubble up through these criteria. They pass on the first and second. When it comes to the third, when they show this apathy or a little bit of a screen in front of them, I don't like them. I like these Scorpios like you and me, who bring everything, the kitchen sink, to work, because we just throw ourselves into the job and we love what we do. I love what I do, David. I've always loved what I was doing.
Yeah. One of the things that you've demonstrated in this podcast is just your belief in all people and how everybody makes a difference in your company. I knew I would learn some more by spending some more time with you, and I loved every bit of it. Thank you very much.
David, thank you for having me, and look forward to seeing you again.
Now, we're all driven to be successful, but when you spend time with Indra, you can see that we unlock a whole new level of success when we elevate those around us. And now it's time for my favorite part of our podcast episode. This is where I give you some coaching to help you develop as a leader. This week, as part of your weekly development plan, here's what I want you to do. Make it a point to intentionally lift up someone on your team. You probably already know exactly who it needs to be. Maybe shoot them a thoughtful email. Give them a public shout out. Create a development opportunity. Heck, you can even take a page out of Indra's playbook and write a note to their parents. But find more and more ways to build up your team, and I guarantee you'll find your leadership skills will build up as well. So do you want to know how leaders lead? What we learned today is that great leaders look for ways to elevate others. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of How Leaders Lead, where every Thursday you get to listen in while I interview some of the very best leaders in the world. I make it a point to give you something simple on each episode that you can apply to your business so that you will become the best leader you can be.